Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting Ask Me Anything session right here on YouTube. I am Danish, your host for today's engaging conversation. We have a fantastic guest with us, Remkus De Vries, a true expert in web performance and development. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest for today's Ask Me Anything session, none other than Remkus. So Remkus is a name resonates strongly in the world of web performance and development. With a career as I was searching with his profile as with a career of spanning around uh, 17 years, so Remkus has become a
19.
renowned authority 19 years,
Yeah.
uh, renowned authority in the digital landscape, earning the respect and admiration of peers and professionals worldwide. As the founder of Truer Than Not, a leading digital agency known for its innovation, solution, and commitment to excellence, Remkus has been at the forefront of shaping the web development industry. So the reason for the like AMS like this, so hosting like AMS, this one is not only a privilege but also a way to connect with brilliant mind like Remkus and share their expertise with all of you. So our goal today is to bring you valuable insights into web performance, development, best practices in the journey of building a successful web agency, or you can say a website. Whether you are a seasoned professional or just starting in the world of web development, there is something here for everyone. So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation and get ready to learn from one of the best in the field. And sorry if I took too much time for the introduction.
No
So
worries.
first, I would like Remkus to tell us about your journey with the WordPress, and then we will start taking the questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, Danish. That's a lot of honor bestowed upon me. My name is Remkus De Vries. I've been using WordPress since 2004, end of 2004. 2005 started to get a little bit serious, and then at the end of 2005, WordPress introduced Pages, and with Pages, there was a light CMS. So that essentially meant I moved all of my clients over from Mambo and Joomla into WordPress. That's how I learned WordPress. I've had a WordPress dedicated agency since 2006. I've gone through various names, but Truer Than North is where we currently are at. And for the last 6-7 years, I've been focusing on more complex projects, and complexity pretty much always introduces a level of performance. So complexity, performance, just doing things the smart way, not the hard way, is essentially what I'm about. And if you want to know anything more about me and my profile, I have a link in bio page, remk.us. So that should at least give you insights into the type of stuff that I share. I have a newsletter, podcast, as well as, of course, the agency.
Great, good to know about your journey, Remkus. Let's begin with the question that we already got from our website. Like we have created the landing page
Yep.
where people ask questions. So the first question is, uh, can you share some common performance bottlenecks that WordPress users often encounter, and how can they address them?
That's a good one. That's a good one to start with, because tackling this problem is going to solve a lot of future performance as well as some short and immediate ones. It is the old adage of, if you look at WordPress is and what it allows you to do, there's essentially no limit, right? You can build anything. However, just because WordPress doesn't limit you, you should limit yourself. And the simple reason for this is that when you start adding complex plugins by just not really testing them out, you're creating a combination of solutions on top of your WordPress site, which in one way or another are going to slow down your site. So the common mistake here is that turning on a caching plugin solves your performance. It does not. It may be fine if you have a small presentation site You have maybe 30 visitors a day. Nothing really happens on your site. That's fine. But as soon as performance becomes a bottleneck, that already means you have higher traffic, more page views, or maybe even in a WooCommerce site where there's actively people purchasing stuff from your site. You want your site to be as fast as humanly possible. And that means, for instance, that caching isn't going to solve the problem anymore. A lean and mean site is where it starts. And then the full understanding that as soon as somebody is logged in, as soon as somebody adds something to cart, that means your site is no longer cached. From that moment on, they're looking at raw performance. So that means whatever is running on your site, uncached, is an influence on the performance of your site. And bottlenecks start by you adding more complexity to the site than you possibly need. So the most easy way to address those bottlenecks is to start testing. That means create a staging site. Add the staging site, whatever you want to test with, test the performance before and after. And not just the front page, but every single page that is important in your user journey. So don't limit yourself there. Be annoyingly diligent, right? So for instance, if you have WooCommerce, that's a great great example, because the experience of people is, I updated WooCommerce, no error in my dashboard, should be fine, let's go. Now, the thing is, you most likely have plugins that do something with your checkout, something with your products, possibly something with your payment. And all three have become then something that can become a performance bottleneck. So what you need to do on a staging site, make sure you test and upgrade those plugins first and test per upgrade what is happening. Once everything is in the clear, that's when you move stuff to production. So the way to address common performance bottlenecks, which is usually just an overload of stuff being active on your site that doesn't need to be active on your site, and start optimizing that in the staging before you move it to production. I'd say that that about covers it. I mean, I can tell you about all the performance bottlenecks, but we need a separate session for that.
Yeah, I understand. And we have seen multiple times in the community, like people are asking, like I am editing my website, like it is already in like editing mode, like it is not finalized, but I am using this and that cache plugin, and I can able to see the changes while I am editing the site, but when I publish the changes, I cannot see the changes on the website, like after publishing it. So what would you recommend? Like, is it good to use the cache plugin during the editing of your website, like you are working on your site, or is it good to use it at the end, like you are done with the editing, you created the pages and the post, and you are done with the design and landing pages, and then it's time to like optimize it?
So I think the whole idea of understanding what you're looking at is essentially two-faced, because you have on the one side, you have your uncached plugin, sorry, your uncached site, and you have your cached site, and you need to test both. Now, the sequence is you test your uncached first, then you test it cached. And that is the only way to approach this. There's no way around this. This essentially means that you need to do more work and be more vigilant about testing, because it all boils down to testing. If you don't know what the impact of adding a plugin is, changing a plugin, or deleting a functionality, then you're running blind. And I don't know about you, but I hate to cross the street without seeing what I'm going to walk into. So why would that be any different if we're talking about a website?
You are right, and good. Like you address this issue, as I have seen this issue multiple time in the community. So the next question is uh, related to factors. Like, what are the key factors to consider when optimizing the performance of a WordPress website with WooCommerce integration?
The key factors in considering optimizing the performance of a WordPress slash WooCommerce site. So I think I kind of already gave the answer in the first question in my example. So because WooCommerce means that the vast majority of your traffic is going to be uncached, you need to have a different type of setup. That means, so in hosting, we always say you get what you paid for. So if your plan is the cheapest plan, then chances are you are running into some limits somewhere. So ideally, you find yourself with unlimited RAM usage, unlimited workers, unlimited data usage, um, all of those types of things, right? You do not want to start with something that is limited when you want something unlimited. So that's the first thing to look at. The other key factor I would say is, referencing what I answered before, that is the thing that you want to have a lean and mean site. And that means you need to, again, start testing. Like, what does lean and mean mean? Well, for instance, if you start with the WooCommerce storefront theme, you have a high chance of having a performant theme. If you start with a theme from Theme Forest, you have a very large chance you're not starting with a performant theme. And the thing with WooCommerce is that problems that you're introducing that way will compound. So instead of it being annoying when it's a publication site, when you're just having static pages and the contact form and fine, if it's a WooCommerce site, it's uncached. It means people look from a different intent. They intend to purchase something from you. You do not want to have a situation where that becomes an annoyance because the site loads too slow, and there's not stuff is not happening fast enough. So I think the key factors are hosting that is enabling, and a theme and plugin combination that is lean and mean. So as few options possible in the theme. It just needs to do what it just needs to do. And I highly recommending just using full site editing. Even adding something like Elementor, for instance, is already adding quite a bit of load time to your site. And the more performance you need, the more of these compounding stuff. So adding all extra layers that aren't necessarily needed from a from an optimized point of view, that's going to make things difficult for you. So, yeah, I think that covers the two key factors I would highlight.
Yeah. And we also got a comment from Rahman, and he is asking like, are there any specific plugin or tool that you recommend for monitoring and improving the performance of a WordPress site?
Oh, that almost sounds like it's a setup question, because at the moment, together with my partner Barry, we are creating such a tool, because I find there is not such a tool. There is not a tool that properly does this the way it's supposed to be done. So we have created scanfully.com. It's still very much in alpha, but we are looking for beta testers. And what our service and tool will do is exactly what you want to know. You want to know the impact of changes happening on your WordPress site. You want to know about the site health compartments. You want to know about the core web vitals. You want to know about the raw performance, like how fast is my time to first byte? Is that still fast? So yeah, to answer that comment, I don't think there's a good solution, which is why we're building one. Thank you for allowing me to do a shout out on that. Scanfully.com.
So hopefully Rahman got his answer. So our next question is like, how can I improve the performance of my WordPress site if I have limited technical expertise? Are there beginner-friendly steps I can take?
Beginner friendly steps. So it's tough, because with performance, you quickly enter the realm of you needing to understand what it is you're doing. But let's assuming you have proper good hosting. Let's assuming you've started lean and mean, and you understand the concept of that. So that means not adding 15 big plugins of and for each plugin that you're adding, you're only needing a very small fraction of its functionality. That's not the way to go. So if you also have lean and mean plugins, and you're aware of that you should be hesitant to start adding stuff to your site. So if you have that handled, that technically is without any technical expertise. Then the next thing, the most beginner-friendly way to actually make your site more compliant with performance metrics, I would say core vitals and an optimized version of your site are then generated by, there's 3 plugins that I would recommend you start using. But to be honest, every single one of them is going to have to, you're going to have to elevate your knowledge because you need to understand what you're doing in those plugins. But Perf Matters, which allows you to turn off and turn on certain scripts running on certain pages. NitroPack, which is a cloud solution to optimize your site, and WP Rocket, which is a WordPress-based site front-end optimizer. Those are the 3 plugins that do indeed add caching in some way, at least the last 2, not the first one. And I stand by what I said. Caching doesn't solve your performance problem, but you will want to have caching or optimizing of front-end output. And the last 2 plugins, NitroPack and WP Rocket, they do that. But having said that, you can still enormously screw up your site by configuring any of those 3 plugins the wrong way. So I guess what I'm trying to say, there is no beginner-friendly steps at all. You will need to educate yourself in depth. There's no way around it. So how deep you want to go, that's that depends on how much you like digging in the rabbit holes. But you'll have to come a little bit further from absolute beginner into understanding some consequences of should I be not loading this particular JavaScript file on this particular page. So for instance, Perf Matters allows you to say, let's say you have a form plugin and you only use a form on your contact page. It makes 0 sense for the form JavaScript and CSS to also load on the front page or on your category pages or wherever. That doesn't make any sense. So Perf Matters is a solution that allows you to configure, no, I don't need those there. I just need them on the contact page. Relatively easy to understand and to work with. But again, every single solution is going to require that you deepen your technical expertise. There's no way around it, in my opinion.
Yeah, as you suggest some of the plugin, and we also see in the community, like people are asking about the website with the media files, like they place very heavy size images on the website, and
Yep.
it also impact the performance. So we have a question related to this, and that is, could you please provide some tips for improving page load time on WordPress site, especially for those with a lot of media content?
So a lot of media content is never the problem. Well, never the problem. That's probably overstating it as well. But in of itself, having a lot of media on your site doesn't necessarily mean you have a performance problem. The problem is when you start loading those images full 4 MBs per image, for instance. That's a problem. You want to have featured images, and you want to have those featured images, limited to about 100 to 150 KB, ideally. So providing optimized images is something you can do entirely native within WordPress. There's nothing weird that you have to do about that. The second part is lazy loading. Now, WordPress solves most of the lazy loading already by default now. This is happening since 6.3. Are we now? So 6.2 or 6.1 changed the lazy loading in a way where if you don't add any weird stuff to it, you should be fine. If you want to provide optimized images to your site, a plugin like Imagify is a good one. But my personal favorite is going with a Cloudflare Pro plan, which costs about $25-30 per month. But it allows a lot of optimizations and for images, just by default having optimized images available for you on what we call the edge. So at the layer that is in front of your WordPress site is the most optimized version to begin with. So Imagify, if Cloudflare is too much, Imagify still is a premium plugin, but one that is worth your effort into making sure you have an optimized site.
Absolutely. And as you already give suggestion about the hosting, and we have a second like our next question related to hosting, like what role does web hosting play in the web performance, and what should I look for in a hosting provider to ensure optimal site speed?
Um, I'm going to repeat myself again. In the role web hosting plays is quite important. So you can never build a highly performant site on a shared hosting costing only 10, 15 euros a month, dollars, whatever. That is almost impossible. So you need to start understanding that if you want web hosting to not be a bottleneck, you need to spend some money. Now, where that money begins, that really depends on what your ultimate goal is. But the things to look for in a hosting provider is as little limits as possible. Like storage, fine if that's a limitation. I don't care about that. We can solve that in a different way. But performance in terms of dedicated CPU and PHP workers, as much as possible, you want to have no limits there. You just want to be on the fastest hardware you can find, period. So yeah, hosting plays a very, very crucial part in it. I would even say, so no, let me add this. So if you're looking at hosting and thinking that it's going to solve everything, that's also incorrect. Even if you have the highest, fastest hosting with all the RAM, all the workers, all everything, you can still screw up that site. You can still make it slow. So for instance, if you add WooCommerce, if you add a very complicated theme from ThemeForest, if you then also add Elementor, then you have templates inside, and you have this and you have that, then you and then God forbid you add WPML, you are certain your site is running way too many queries, doing way too much loading. So fast hosting won't solve that. That will still be slow. But again, if you go back to what I previously said, if you approach everything like this in a let's be lean and mean, then hosting is going to be the thing that separates you from the rest. And one of the best ways to test how fast your hosting is not necessarily by default benchmark test, but is raw testing. What is your time to first byte? Your time to first byte is a great indicator of how fast your site responds after you hit the browser and hit enter for any given URL. That's probably a good way to start looking at what hosting can do.
Hosting plus your best practices to make the site right well. So, great suggestions. We have another comment from Fatima. She's saying like great session so far. So she's asking like with the growing importance of core web vitals for search engine optimization,
Yeah.
what strategies can WordPress users employ to improve their site performance in these metrics?
To fix core web vitals, you need to understand core web vitals. So for the largest portion, it essentially means don't just start loading heavy files in the DOM, in the browser, just because you're not aware of it. So if you have a large JavaScript file, for instance, doing 10 different things, it makes a lot more sense to not load them as one thing, but have them as maybe combined 5 files that do two things, or I don't know, 7 files where 5 do 2 and other do 3, or whatever. The web, the core vitals are essentially created in such a fashion that it emulates as best as how your site is being viewed by any variety of visitors. Which means if you're loading too much too early, your site's going to look borked for the next 3-4 seconds while it's loading. So most of the metrics are geared towards you understanding the impact of what your site is loading has on the experience of those visiting your site. So long-winded answer, but it basically comes down to you need to start investing time into understanding what the various metrics of core web vitals mean. That is the best way to go, because In some, and they will tell you if you do a Google Lighthouse score test on your site, you will see where the problems are because the problems will be listed, right? Google answers those questions and is very particular. You're loading too much here. This needs to be improved. This is kind of okay. This is fine, but here's the thing you need to solve. So if you've never looked at those in this inspect browser, and then what's it called? I do it so automatically that I don't even think about it. Yeah, it's called Lighthouse, and then you generate a Lighthouse report, and it will tell you exactly what it means. And when it's referencing FCP or INP or all of these acronyms, click on it, make sure you understand what it means and how it's being helpful in this is what you need to change.
Thanks for the suggestion. And the next question is related to database performance. As someone is asking, like, in your experience, what are the most effective techniques for optimizing a WordPress site database performance?
Database performance. So I am of the opinion that database performance should be solved at a host level. I know there's ways where you can create your custom combine everything type of hosting. But here's the thing. If you have a bad database design, by design, I mean all its configurations, combined with wonderful Linux setup, then you can still have a slow database, because if the two are not talking to each other in an optimal way, there's a bottleneck. So the first thing I would do is start looking at hosts that have a truly deep understanding of how to provide a symbiotic layer between the two, right? So databases are fast, the Linux is fast, and Nginx is fast. Now all three need to communicate fast to each other through the application that is WordPress. So that's the first step. Then if you look at the database itself, so one of the things that you see advised on the internet is saying, listen, if you want to have a fast database, make sure you delete your revisions. That has nothing to do with performance. If you are deleting your revisions and it turns out your site is faster, you have a bad database design talking to the rest of the application and the site and the server. So I think optimizing a site's database performance starts there. You want to be adding indexes wherever you can. You want to be using the latest storage engines, the fastest. I would say that's pretty much it. I mean, from a coding perspective, you could say, hey, listen, instead of running that query every single time on every single page load, you want to maybe optimize that and store that query output in a transient and use that transient for the rest of the 24 hours, and then maybe update it or whatever. So that's sort of, I don't know if the question is also meant in that direction, but that's at least something I would use as much as possible, transients. There's also adding Redis and Object Cache Pro. That's something I would highly recommend you look into if you're running into performance issues. And when I say performance issues, that would be, for me, in the category of having a couple of 100,000 products, high traffic WooCommerce type of site. That's a lot happening. There's a lot of disk write, input, output, moving in every single direction constantly. Then yes, that's Object Cache Pro combined with Redis is a good solution to start looking at. That kind of solves one of the bottlenecks of WordPress site database performance, because by default that is MySQL. The smartest solution is MariaDB, but in either way, combining Object Cache Pro with Redis solves, I would say, 95% of all the performance issues you have. And if you then still have issues, then you are having a type of site that probably needs to scale in one way or another differently.
I second you, Remkus, as I already use like Object Cache Pro with Redis as it is available on the CloudWatch platform as well.
Yep.
So I use it and I do the benchmarking like before OCP and Redis, and after so I like notice the optimization, like the speed increases and the load time uh, increases, or you can or decreases, sorry,
Increase.
load
Yeah,
time
yeah,
decreases. So it worked well with the database. Like if you are like looking for the database solution, so Object Cache Pro is the one.
yeah, yeah.
So moving on to the, yeah.
No, it's the whole combination, right? It's the proper proper setup. So the where you start from needs to already be optimized. That means MariaDB. That means the configuration set in a way that is highly effective for you. That means uh, uh, fast and performant storage engines using. That means setting indexes where needed. And once all that is taken care of and you're still seeing a slow site, that means, yes, there needs to be a different layer added to it. And that to me
Yeah,
is Object Cache Pro. Yes.
great. Moving on to the next question. Are there any common mistakes or misconception about the WordPress performance optimization? I think Remkus already answered, like using the
Actually,
cache plugin
yeah,
is
yeah,
not
that's a
like
good
a
one.
solution. So
Um,
I also want your take, yeah,
yeah,
on
so
it.
caching plugins, again, don't solve your performance problem. They hide them. And oftentimes that can be fine. But if you're reliant on people logging in, purchasing stuff, that already is not a solution that you can work with. Again, comments also do the same thing. So that all invalidates cache. So the WordPress performance optimization suggestions usually are in that direction. Uh, um, I mentioned the database, right? If you have a lot of revisions because you have an editorial team that needs it and needs to look back, or maybe you need to be able to. So I built a site for a bank a couple of years back where they needed to go back into time. So they needed to be able to present what the site looked like on a given day, time, and year. So that means we needed to store everything always. Um, that's a solution where we need a lot of revisions, like a lot of revisions, site revisions as well as page revisions or post revisions in WordPress. And the conception is that if you delete those, it becomes faster. That's not the case. It's got the magnitude of revisions that you would need before that becomes a problem is way bigger than people think. Like um, they're thinking their 5% is close to 95% of an impact, and it's just the 5%. It's just so small. Yeah, I think those are, for me, the biggest misconceptions that I commonly see. I mean, there's small little detail type stuff, but that kind of already depends on what type of situation you're running. Maybe here's another one. So the amount of plugins is never a problem. I have clients that have close to 100 plugins that are running 4 or 5 million page views per month without any problem, without any glitches, hitches, whatever. They're fast, they're performant, and yet they're still almost running 100 plugins. Why is that? Because the plugins are lean and mean. They do exactly what they need to do, and just that. They are conscious of when they're loaded, what they're loading, how long they're loading, all of those things. If you have those types of plugins, the number of plugins really isn't that big of an issue. I've also seen sites that have about 20 plugins and are just slow as you can possibly pour slow stuff. Weird comparison, but that is a bigger issue. If you add the multi-purpose plugins with multi-purpose themes, with a multi-language solution like WPML, so complex upon complex upon complex, yeah, that's not helping. That is a problem. So the number of plugins really by heart isn't a problem at the core of it, but can be if you're making the wrong choices. So it's kind of a double one. It is a common mistake and misconception, but it's also a valid one if you're just adding and without thinking.
Cool. So our next question is, with the increasing importance of mobile friendliness, how can WordPress users ensure their sites are not only fast but also responsive on the mobile devices?
With the increasing importance of mobile friendliness, how can WordPress users ensure their sites are not only fast but also responsive on mobile? So, um, I think the easiest answer for me here is to start using full site editing default built in WordPress and just leave it at that. Because a lot of your problems are already solved in a proper full site editing themes. Great example of this is ollywp.com by Mike McAllister. That is a theme that works out of the box. It does a lot of fancy stuff, but it does it the right way. So it doesn't load anything weird. It's just highly performant. It automatically loads your site well for mobile, tablet, all of that. And it does that by using the core of WordPress. Um, I think starting there is probably the best. Yeah.
Right. So we have next question related to the CDN. What role does the CDN play in enhancing the performance of WordPress website? And how should users choose the right CDN for their needs?
Um, so a CDN generally only plays a role in improving the performance of your assets. Now, there's also fancy CDNs, which Cloudflare, for instance, is a good example of. They not only offer a CDN, but they also offer a web application firewall. There's an argument to be made if you take a little bit more fancy type CDN, it has higher impact on your performance because, for one, a web application firewall will stop bad bots before they even hit your site. So, thus, you're saving performance. Put elements out of your performance budget, so that by default makes your site more capable of performance. But a CDN plays a decent role. Again, you can still screw up a site in building it, and adding a CDN won't do that much of a change. But if your audience is not hyper local, it makes a lot of sense to start using a CDN because that means your assets are loaded faster for everybody around the world. Um, I typically don't use like Akamai or any other of the what is it, Bunny CDN type solutions. You can. I just haven't seen the performance gain by using those types over, for instance, Cloudflare CDN, um, to the point that I want to start using them more often. There's a little difference maybe now and then here and there, maybe in times of how long it is cached and stuff like that. So the paid premium plan, so the Pro plan by Cloudflare, gives you more control over how long stuff is being cached. I would recommend that, but I don't know. I think I kind of am of the opinion that CDNs are not that big of a deal anymore as they were a couple of years ago. That's not saying there's not a use case for them. There is. I'm just saying that there's also, in terms of budget and what it costs, solutions like Cloudflare that make more sense to use and treat that as a CDN. But the CDN solutions that combine the content delivery network with a web application firewall type solution always will have my preference. So for me, that's Cloudflare Pro.
Cloudflare, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a comment on a YouTube from Mohammed Mutahir, and like he's asking, I think the question is not complete. He's like asking about the tool GT Matrix, Ping Dom, and Page Speed Insight.
Yep.
How these tools contribute to the regular performance checks.
They are a way to check. Um, it is a metric. There are more metrics out there that are, I think, probably a little nicer. But in an ideal world, you want to. No, let me rephrase. If you want, you can build a site that is slow but performs well for GT metrics. So, and that goes for all of them, right? Lighthouse, the same thing. If you want, you can build it in such a fashion that the measuring is perfect, but the actual site is crap. So keep that in mind as you're looking at GT metrics and all of the other testing tools. So they serve a purpose and they tell you something, but they don't necessarily tell you um, hmm, the best type of answer. For me, a lighthouse and a raw performance check is probably the smarter one. It's something we're solving in Scanfully as well. Um, just because there's too much debate. So what you don't have any influence on, unless you're on a premium plan, if I'm not mistaken, for GT metrics or Pingdom or whatever, all of these types of tools, you don't have any control over where you're testing from. So uh, if you're testing from Canada and your site is in I don't know Poland, that's a large distance already. So that's going to flaw whatever your metrics are saying. I prefer to look at raw metrics, performance metrics, stuff that you can test on the command line, stuff that we're going to test with Scanfully, as well as looking at the Lighthouse scores. Those are way more determined in whether your site is perceived fast or not. I think that's a smarter way to do it. Again, not saying
Great.
that GT metrics doesn't have a place. It does. It just comes with a caveat.
So I am skipping like the next question that is related to like trends and optimization trends, as you already answered this question. So
Yeah.
moving on to the second last question that is related to community, and I also wanted to know the answer of this. How do you stay up to date with the ever evolving world of WordPress and web performance? And what resources or communities do you recommend for others looking to do the same?
You're asking me for my trade secrets. Um, so I don't think there's a one source. Um, I try to provide some of the source for this with my newsletter. Inside WordPress newsletter is, and you can find that link in my on my link in bio site at remk.us. So I try to solve most of what you're asking here. In terms of the ever evolving world of to be connected inside the community, and the most obvious place for that to be is still on X, formerly known as Twitter. I think the largest part of the core of the WordPress community is active there. There are splinter off in possibly on Mastodon and stuff like that, but it's harder to find. I guess in a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of information there, but there's also a lot of misinformation. So that's a difficult one to solve. So you first need to understand who are trusted sources, trusted voices. Yeah, I hate to beat my own drum, but subscribing to my newsletter is probably a good start. And in it, I highlight various folks that are sharing stuff that is of value. So I talk about performance stuff. I talk about new stuff happening inside the WordPress community. In terms of communities and specific resources, it's a little bit everywhere. There's no one here's for everything up to date. So, you can look at wptavern.com that has some of the information, but you can look at independent bloggers like Ronald Eureka. You can look at stuff being shared by Mike McAllister and Ollie WP, for instance, and they will all give you a little bit of the information, and they will reference it. I will say that developer.wordpress.org /news, I think it is, highlights the developer blogs that are written with high detail in terms of the new features in WordPress coming out and how to best use them. But it's a lot, and I know it's a lot because I'm being that filter through my newsletter. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and if you're new to the community or relatively new, it's hard to know who the trusted voices are. What information is misinformation? That's hard. I don't have the proper answer for that. All I can say is that they are there, but they're splintered. So
I want to add one thing, like one suggestion from my side, like is start following the influencers like Remkus and like similar influencers like Remkus, those who are discussing the performance issues and
Yeah.
metrics on their Twitter account. So it is good to follow them on a Twitter. Like I am
Johnny
following
Harris,
him from,
Johnny
yeah,
Harris, Felix Ernst,
yeah,
just I'm sure I'm forgetting names here, but Pascal Birchler, all of them share stuff regularly, but not all the
yeah,
time. So you just happen to have to catch it. So that's tough.
yes,
I try to digest what they share in my again in my newsletter, so that's part of it. But yeah, you want to find some. I'm still not used to calling myself an influencer, so but you wanna follow some of the folks that are highly involved in WordPress. Yes.
yeah, yeah. That is the key to like keep yourself updated about the performance factors.
Yeah.
Our last question is related to like, can you share a success story or case study of a WordPress site that you helped significantly improve in terms of performance and how it benefited the business?
I can. Um, Let me think which one to pick. So I think I have one. I'm not going to name them, but about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a client that, or the person owning the site, I kind of knew, um, and they were running into some performance issues. They had a lot of technical debt. There was at the time still PHP 4 type code running when 7.4 surely should be the one where they were building for. And they needed somebody to step in and take over all of the technical development and performance optimizations. So we came to an agreement that I was going to do that. And at the time, they had about 1.6, 1.7 million page views per month, which was decent. It was good. But a good audit. So I offer two things. I offer a quick scan and I offer a deep scan. For anyone curious, they're published on my site. The deep scan essentially highlights all the things where you need to start that will have a significant improvement impact. Once I had done that, the deep scan, I was pretty sure that page views would go up just by mere optimizations. There's some SEO combined there as well, but again, performance also has an SEO component, so it's a little bit double. And I told them that within the year we should be able to reach about 2 million. And what I did in that year and what I'm still doing is constantly testing which components are slowing down the site. Some of them are doing only stuff in the back end, never hits the front end. Fine. I want to focus on everything that has a way to rendering stuff on the front end. And by focusing on that, we are slowly getting the site out of technical debt. And the process has been 4 years and counting. But the end result is that they've grown above 2.5 in the last couple of years, and that's solely because they're not producing more content, but the content that they are producing is more optimized and has a positive impact. That has a positive impact on performance, and that is a nice thing because you hear the story so much of just optimize this and do that, and you'll see performance gains. You'll see it, but it's hard to really see it well unless you start looking at scale. And this site already had scale, so it's a lot more easier to measure. And the growth that they're seeing is still happening, not as fast as in the beginning because there was a lot of stuff that could be improved. But there's still stuff that constantly can be improved, and that ultimately, because their business is about showing ads and collaborations and stuff like that. So the more performant their site is, the more money they make. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So we are done with our questions, and we have one last comment on our YouTube.
Okay.
This is from Sayed, and he's saying this. I just joined now, and I'm not sure if you have answered this question or not. what things to look for while considering any hosting companies for speed and performance consideration. As I think you answered this about the hosting, but your take on it.
So I think the most important thing to look for in a host is that the budget meets your expectations. That sometimes means you need to provide more budget if you have a particular expectation. But you want to look for hosting companies that provide you a hosting solution that doesn't limit you. That's the raw base approach of anyone looking for a performance site. So if it needs to be fast, if it really needs to be fast, then you need to start with understanding that it's going to cost you money, and that's anywhere between 35 to 100 a month. That's in that range. It's still a big range, but it's certainly not below 35. And you want to look for hosts that don't limit you, that understand scaling, that talk about scaling, that talk about being able to capture big bursts of traffic. If they don't talk about that in an obvious way, then most likely that's a hosting party that sort of does it and probably maybe also understands it, but it doesn't make it a highlight. I would look for hosting companies that make it a highlight. It's probably the most generic type of way I can answer that question without understanding the case of what kind of site do you have and what does it need to
Yeah.
do and all that. So
Yeah. So that's it for today, and we have one more comment that is like from Seth saying thanks to you and to everyone. So we are
you're welcome.
done with today's AMS session, and that's it. So dear viewers, we are bringing us to the end of this enlightening AMS session with Remkus. We hope you have found today's discussion as insightful and inspiration as we have. So a big thank you to esteemed guest Remkus for generously sharing your wisdom, experience, and valuable insight
You're
into
most
web
welcome.
performance development. And thanks for sharing about your successful digital agency throughout the North. So for the viewers, if you enjoyed today's session and want more engaging content like this, please do let us know on our social channels. So we are done with today. And once again, thanks to Remkus for his valuable time. I know he's a very busy person. So thanks for joining us today and have a
You're most
fantastic
welcome.
day.
You
We
too.
are done with today's session. So bye to everyone.
Thank you for this. Bye bye.